Mr. President, is your own personal commitment to finding solutions to some of the world's most intractable conflicts in order to secure peace.
So, a pertinent message, Penny Mordaunt, and then some flattery. What did you make of that?
Well, I'm glad the King had that in his speech, and I suspect that he's used today as well to raise Ukraine privately with President Trump. The President's stated policy is peace through strength, but we clearly need to show Putin more strength. And his own senators have been pushing him much more on financial sanctions, but I'm afraid in the last few days the US has relaxed sanctions on Belarus, which means that Russia will be able to get access to civilian aircraft parts and other things that it wants. So this is not a coordinated approach from Europe and the US on this matter, and we have to if we want to bring the war in Ukraine to an end. OK, the significance, Nick, of the monarch in the way he spoke about Ukraine with the president sitting to his right hand.
Well, and also the significance of what Penny has just said. Penny was leader of the House of Commons. Penny would have had meetings with the King. So for Penny to say that the King would have raised Ukraine in private with the King is highly significant, because that is suggesting that this is very much on the King's mind. We do know that the King shares the political consensus in this country that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is an existential moment for the whole of Europe. And we know that his government, Keir Starmer, is worried that Donald Trump sort of veers a bit to the Russian side. So to hear the King saying, of course you're standing with us against that tyranny, that's in doubt. But then specifically to reference what the President does say, which he is all about peace wherever there's conflict in the world, is trying to marry the facts of You're for Peace to you will stand up against Russia and Ukraine, won't you?
Elizabeth Pipko, will Donald Trump hear what the King was saying and do something about it?
I'm sure he'll hear what the King is saying. I'm also sure he's not surprised by what the King is saying, right? President Trump is very aware, I think, before he even showed up in England, of what he was going to hear and what the topics were going to be, right? Everybody knows what's on everyone's mind. That's obviously what's going on in Israel and Gaza. That's what's going on between Russia and Ukraine, right? I think that's all that most of us are talking about. So yes, he's going to hear him out. I'm sure he's going to hear more from Starmer tomorrow, and I'm also sure he's going to try to continue working with them to come to a solution here. The fact is, no one is worried Donald Trump leans to Putin's side. No one is worried Donald Trump leads to Russia's side.
That's not true.
Donald Trump leads too far to America's side.
That's not true. There are people across Europe and actually in the United States who are...
there are countless people. I mean, anybody with a brain is aware Donald Trump is not leaning towards Russia's side. Donald Trump is leaning towards America's side and is trying to make sure that America awards a nuclear war with Russia and make sure that we try to make this come to an end in the most diplomatic way possible to avoid risking anything else more than what's already happened.
At one point, Donald Trump was asked who did he want to win, Ukraine or Russia. He couldn't answer Ukraine. Let me bring in Gillian Tett.
What did he say? But what did he say?
Let me bring in Gillian Tett.
What was his answer?
Let me bring in Gillian Tett, if I may. The significance of the King's intervention. How do you assess that?
Well, I was actually in Kiev last weekend, and I can tell you that there is a desperate hope that the British will do whatever they can to put pressure on Washington to become more supportive. But there's a bit of irony here, because on the one hand, what Ukraine is desperately looking for right now is weapons and money and pressure on Putin. And Britain is trying to persuade Trump to do this with this display of horse-drawn carriages and, you know, all these kind of things that could have been out of some kind of Disney Hollywood movie vision of Britain from the 19th century. And that is soft power, and they're playing to what President Trump wants, which is not just flattery, but to be in his own reality TV show, or Hollywood show if you like, with a vision of Britain taken from Downton Abbey or The Crown and things like that. And I can tell you, in some ways, it's very effective, because today in America, the television screens have been full of those displays of horse and carriages. And it's a very impressive, and we must hope, very persuasive diplomatic missile.
Michael Wolff, will it work?
No, I'm going to tell you what Donald Trump felt at that moment. He's super irritated.
By the King saying
yeah. He's going to take that as a direct slap.
He didn't look irritated, to be fair to President Trump. He did look suddenly up at the King, but he didn't look irritated.
Well, I'm going to tell you what was going on behind that those eyes. Yeah, I mean, to be told like that, to be talked down down like that, to essentially be corrected like that. I mean, he knows he has a problem here. He can't end the war in Ukraine. This is a big issue with him. And if he can't end that war as he promised, then his alternative is that issue has to go away. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to talk about it.
Did anyone think the king was talking down to the president tonight? That was not the impression I got.
The king is incredibly skilled at having these conversations, and he will know what is going to happen tomorrow.
It was a very pointed rebuke.
It was
there
pointed,
there is no other way to look at that than the king saying, and I think it was audacious on the king's part, and it may threaten the balance of what the Brits are trying to achieve here, the good feeling. But it was a necessary. I'm amazed that the king did this, and full of. Believe me, he really deserves all the credit for this, because correcting Donald Trump is not something that anyone does.
I don't think that the king meant it in that way, and he will have.
What do you mean he didn't mean it in that way? It is.
Let Penny Morden finish.
But understand this. It is. I mean,
Michael, there's
the
one
Ukraine.
person on this sofa who knows King Charles's mind, and that's Penny Morden.
There's one person who knows Donald Trump's mind on this sofa and on this panel.
Well, you can say what Donald Trump's reaction would have been, but I know the king will have spent a lot of time with the president today, and they will have talked about a whole raft of things, and he's incredibly skilled at broaching these issues and encouraging people and trying to set up the best outcomes for tomorrow.
Okay,
let me very briefly say,
Can I just
Elizabeth, sorry, Elizabeth, let me very briefly say the British government and the British system, who have fears about Donald Trump veering in the direction of Russia, which is they fear that he accepts the fundamental Russian narrative, which is he often says that Ukraine is to blame for where we are because they wanted to join NATO, and the fear is that is fundamentally accepting what Vladimir Putin calls the causes of the war.
Elizabeth Pipko.
Sure. I mean, I disagree with that. I've spent a lot more time with President Trump than a lot of people on this panel, actually. I think Donald Trump actually blames Joe Biden and his administration for the war, and there's a reason that a lot of people believe that if President Trump was in the Oval Office, the war would not have broken out to begin with. I think in reality, based on what we're just talking about, I do not think the king was saying anything to talk down to Donald Trump. I don't think Donald Trump thought about it that way. I don't think he was impacted, and I thought the king actually spoke very respectfully, and I'm sure they're going to have even more conversations, very respectful ones, on the back end of this. I think there's a narrative that's being pushed here, the one that's been pushed for many years now about Donald Trump. It's incredibly disingenuous. I think it's inappropriate. I don't think it's necessary right now at a time when we're all hoping, even those who don't like Donald Trump, I believe, that he can work with Europe and bring an end to the war.
Narrative you think is being pushed here? This is
the
narrative that he's a
years.
Putin lover. That's the one you have an issue with.
That might be the one you were pushing. I was saying that you wanted to make the world believe that Donald Trump was angry at what the king said today when he did not flinch.
Okay, I'm just going to.
All I can say is, if this was a Hollywood movie, it would be a sequel to Love Actually, but flipped around the other way. I mean, you know, it's astonishing that all of this is playing out on camera in a way that we can see and framed in this way.
Okay. Again, I do recall Elizabeth Pipko, Donald Trump saying, "You don't start a war, you can't win." That was directed at Volodymyr Zelensky. Here is an extract of what President Trump had to say this evening.
Together we've done more good for humanity than any two countries in all of history. Together we must defend the exceptional heritage that makes us who we are, and we must continue to stand for the values and the people of the English-speaking world, and we do indeed stand for that. On behalf of all Americans, I offer a toast to one of the great friendships, to two great countries, and to His Majesty, King Charles III.
Tomorrow, obviously, there will be a press conference with Keir Starmer sitting alongside Donald Trump as he hosts the US president at Chequers. Michael Wolff, do you have any indication of what Donald Trump thinks about the sacking of Lord Mandelson?
Yes, I understand that he's been storming around the White House saying, why couldn't the Prime Minister have waited until after this trip? to fire Mandelson? Why does he have to do it now? And this just brought up the Epstein issue again and again, or as Trump always says when he says Epstein, the Epstein issue. It won't go away. But this particularly made it now overshadow this trip, which was supposed to, among its purposes, get him out from under the constant talk of Epstein. So this just brought it back.
Right. Obviously, the sacking was to make sure it's not really an issue tomorrow. Somebody is going to ask about Epstein tomorrow when the two men are together. How do you think Keir Starmer should handle this?
Well, they should also ask them about 5% defence spending, as you expect me to get in there. But look, the reason why this issue isn't going to go away is because the victims are not going to let it go away. There are so many unanswered questions and too few people being held to account for their actions. So it's not going to go away. I think the public want some more transparency over the issue, and they want some of those questions answered. So if I was advising any politician tomorrow, I would lead with what the victims want.
Right. Gillian Tatt, how do you think Keir Starmer should handle the inevitable Epstein question tomorrow?
Well, it's going to be very difficult because the problem is that the conspiracy theories, or the actual theories and questions, just keep multiplying and multiplying. And so there's a whole body of conspiracy theories that will be looking at, the role of Robert Maxwell and things like that in this whole story, and Ghislaine Maxwell, because that is thought to have been connected to the whole Epstein story as well. So it's a very messy situation. The one thing that's crystal clear is that for all of President Trump's efforts to kill the story off in the last couple of months, it's the one thing that even his own MAGA base are really angry about, and in some ways is actually sparking the biggest split we've seen, or one of the biggest splits in the MAGA base behind Donald Trump to this date.
Elizabeth Pipko, how do you think Donald Trump will handle the question tomorrow when it comes on Epstein?
I'll be honest, I'm pretty sure he will say what I hope all of us can agree with, is that we have much more important issues to talk about. We're here to talk about Ukraine, we're here to talk about Israel, we're here to talk about our world, which is upside down, and Jeffrey Epstein is not top of mind, truly, for him right now. That's what I guarantee he's going to be thinking.
That is completely untrue. It is absolutely top of mind. It is the one issue that he hasn't been able to get around, the one issue that has persisted. Why has it persisted? Because who was Jeffrey Epstein's best friend in life? Donald Trump.
Until he threw him out of Mar-a-Lago, he says.
No,
Exactly.
That's actually not. They broke up over a real estate dispute in 2004.
That's not
the
true.
Mar-a-Lago thing is a complete lie.
And fine.
No,
that was still 4
that's not
years
true.
before Epstein's conviction.
Yes, but it was still from the late 80s through to 2004. What did they do together? They pursued women, girls.
Well, not according to Donald Trump. He has always denied that.
Except in the letter the birthday letter he wrote Jeffrey Epstein. So this is.
He says it wasn't him.
This is, yeah. And who believes that? Literally no one.
Elizabeth Pipko, I mean, Donald Trump does answer questions. He's not the sort of politician that says, well, actually, top of my list is X, Y, Z. That's one thing he does do. What do you think he'll say?
You're right, and I appreciate you giving him credit. He does answer questions. I don't know what Michael's goal here is in life. I'm curious what he's going to end up doing with himself in 3 years when Donald Trump is out of office and he has nothing else to lie about. But the fact is Donald Trump is in Europe to try to figure out what happens next with the world. I'm sure he's going to have something to say about Jeffrey Epstein only because it continues to come up and people want answers. Like you said, people do want answers, including his own supporters, and he knows that. But I hope that we can all agree that right now he has a job to do, and that's to try and stop the war going on in Ukraine, stop what's going on in Gaza as well, and make the world a peaceful place.
Do we think, Nick, that, I mean, obviously when Donald Trump leaves, the UK is going to recognise Palestinian statehood. Is that going to come up privately? I mean, I'm sure there'll be a question again at the press conference tomorrow.
Well, I'm sure they're trying to manage it with great care. Donald Trump knows we're going to do this because Keir Starmer set out 3 conditions that needed to be met by Israel. They haven't been. The meeting where this is meant to be taking place is in New York on Monday, and there is a suggestion that we will make the announcement before that, in other words, just after the state visit. It seems to me they're trying to do some delicate diplomatic diplomatic footwork so it doesn't come up during the state visit. But as you say, Donald Trump does like answering questions, and lots of questions.
Yeah, and Donald Trump is the one person that would have influence on Benjamin Netanyahu. Keir Starmer obviously knows that. It would be a missed opportunity, and certainly Labour MPs and plenty of voters across the country would want Keir Starmer to raise this.
I think it certainly will be raised, but I think that the main focus will be on Ukraine, because I think that is where we're likely to make the most success. I mean, part of the problem for the president is that his foes, Russia, but also his historic allies, are not listening to him. And that is deeply concerning.
Thank you very much to our guests. We appreciate your time. That's it. We're back tomorrow. We'll bring you analysis of what happens at Chequers. Join us then.